Imagine that you waited 35 years to find true love. Imagine that finally, after so many relationships that didn't work out, you found someone who makes you smile, who makes you believe in happy endings. Someone who proposed to you under the stars and promised a lifetime by your side. Now imagine being there, dressed in white, holding a bouquet of roses, with 150 people looking at you, and the altar completely empty. While tears stream down your face in front of friends and family, you don't know that this moment of extreme humiliation is just the beginning of a devastating truth, a truth that a complete stranger is about to reveal, accompanied by 2 police officers. This is the story of Patricia J. Stansfield. And the man she loved wasn't just a liar, he was one of the most wanted criminals by Interpol. Before we start, find a comfortable place. This story has difficult moments, but it also brings a powerful lesson about dignity, truth, and new beginnings. Grab your coffee, prepare yourself emotionally, because you're going to connect deeply with Patricia. And at the end, I want to know, what would you do in her place? Leave your answer in the comments. Now, let's go back to that Saturday morning, June 14th, in Portland, Oregon. St. Paul's Methodist Church was impeccable that morning. The June sunlight filtered through the stained glass windows, painting rainbow patterns across the polished wooden pews. White hydrangeas decorated every row, their sweet scent mixing with vanilla-scented candles that lined the aisle. The pianist sat at the grand piano near the altar, his fingers moving softly over the keys as he rehearsed the wedding march one more time. In the bride's preparation room just off the main hall, Patricia J. Stansfield stood before a full-length mirror, adjusting her veil with trembling fingers. The dress was everything she had dreamed of, ivory silk with delicate lace sleeves, a fitted bodice that made her feel beautiful for the first time in years. At 35, she had almost given up on this moment. Her best friend Claire stood behind her, carefully securing the last pins in Patricia's upswept hair. Claire's reflection in the mirror showed a forced smile, and Patricia noticed it immediately. "You look radiant, Patty," Claire said, but there was something strained in her voice, something that made Patricia's stomach tighten. Patricia tried to smile back, but a cold sensation crept up her spine. She glanced at the small clock on the vanity table. 20 minutes until the ceremony. Mark still hadn't arrived. She reached for her phone on the dresser, her engagement ring catching the light. 5 missed calls to Mark. No messages. No response. Her finger hovered over the call button again when Claire gently touched her shoulder. "I'm sure he's just stuck in traffic," Claire said. But her eyes told a different story. Outside in the main hall, the atmosphere was beginning to shift. The 150 guests, Patricia's colleagues from the accounting firm where she worked, Mark's business associates from the oil consulting company, neighbors, extended family, sat in the pews, whispering quietly among themselves. Some checked their watches. Others glanced toward the entrance, then back at each other with raised eyebrows. Patricia's mother, Margaret, sat in the front row wearing a powder blue dress and a worried expression. She kept turning to look at the church doors, then at Reverend Matthews, who paced near the altar, checking his own watch every few seconds. 15 minutes passed. Then 20. Then 30. The pianist had stopped playing. The silence in the church was deafening. Patricia stood in the preparation room doorway, peeking out at the growing restlessness in the sanctuary. Her bouquet of white roses trembled in her hands. Tears began to well up in her eyes, but she blinked them back, refusing to believe what was becoming increasingly clear. "Maybe there was an accident," she whispered to Claire. "Maybe he's hurt. Maybe." Claire's phone buzzed. She looked at it, and her face went pale. "What? What is it?" Patricia demanded. Claire showed her the screen. A text message from David, Mark's best man. "He's not coming. I'm sorry. He just texted me. Says he can't do it. I don't know what's happening." Patricia felt the world tilt beneath her feet. The bouquet slipped from her fingers and fell to the floor, white petals scattering across the carpet. "No," she breathed. "No, no, no." Claire caught her as her knees buckled. "Patty, I'm so sorry." But Patricia pulled away, stumbling back into the preparation room. She grabbed her phone and called Mark again. It rang once, then went straight to voicemail. His voice, that warm, charming voice she had fallen in love with, came through the recording. "You've reached Mark. Leave a message." "Mark, please," Patricia said into the phone, her voice breaking. "Please tell me what's happening. Everyone's here. I'm here. Please call me back." She hung up and tried again. Voicemail. Again. Voicemail. Outside, she could hear Reverend Matthews addressing the congregation, his voice apologetic and confused. The sound of shuffling feet, murmured conversations, car doors opening and closing. The wedding was over before it had even begun. Margaret rushed into the preparation room, her face a mixture of fury and heartbreak. She pulled Patricia into her arms as her daughter finally broke down, sobbing against her mother's shoulder. How could he do this? Patricia choked out between tears. How could he just leave me here? She didn't know that at that very moment, Mark Jarrell was crossing the Canadian border in a rented SUV with false documents and a briefcase containing $2 million in untraceable bank transfers from an illegal oil deal negotiated with a criminal cell in Iraq. She didn't know that the man she loved, the man who had promised her forever, didn't exist at all. For 3 days, Patricia didn't leave her apartment. The apartment that was supposed to be their home. The apartment where Mark had spent countless nights, where they had cooked dinner together, where he had kissed her and told her she was the most important person in his life. Now it felt like a tomb. The suitcases for their honeymoon to Greece sat unopened in the hallway. The wedding dress hung in the closet like a white ghost, mocking her. The 3-tier cake that never got cut was still in the church's industrial refrigerator. Reverend Matthews had called to ask what she wanted done with it. Patricia had told him to throw it away. She couldn't eat. Couldn't sleep. Just sat on the couch staring at her phone, waiting for an explanation that never came. Mark didn't answer calls. Didn't respond to texts. Didn't respond to emails. He had simply vanished, as if he had never existed at all. Claire came by every day, bringing food that Patricia didn't touch, sitting with her in silence or talking about anything except Mark. On the 3rd day, Claire arrived with information that made Patricia's blood run cold. "Patty, I talked to Jenna," Claire said carefully, sitting down beside her friend. Jenna worked in Mark's office, handling administrative tasks for the oil consulting firm. "And?" Patricia's voice was hoarse from crying. "She said something strange has been going on in his office. Mark hasn't been there for over a week. And when she tried to reach his supervisor to ask about some documents, the supervisor told her Mark never had a supervisor. He was listed as an independent contractor, but there's no record of any actual consulting work." Patricia stared at her. "That's impossible. He went to work every day. He traveled for business meetings. He showed me his office." "I know," Claire said gently. But Jenna checked the building directory. There's no company by that name registered there anymore. It looks like it might have been a front, Patty." "A front? For what?" That evening, after Claire left, Patricia began to go through Mark's things in earnest. He had moved most of his belongings into her apartment over the past 6 months. Clothes in the closet. Books on the shelf. A whole life that had seemed completely normal, completely real. She started with his dresser. Clothes, nothing unusual. Then his desk. Bills, paperwork, all in his name, Mark Jarrell. Nothing suspicious. Then she found the locked drawer. It was a small drawer at the bottom of the desk, one she had never thought about before. Mark had always kept the desk locked, said it was where he kept important client files. Patricia had never questioned it. Why would she? Now she took a kitchen knife and jimmied the lock until it clicked open. Inside, her world shattered. A second passport. Patricia's hands shook as she pulled it out. The photo was Mark's face, those blue eyes, that easy smile she had fallen in love with. But the name was different. Khalid M. Rahman. Nationality, United Arab Emirates. Date of issue, 3 years ago. She turned the pages with numb fingers. Entry and exit stamps from countries she had never heard Mark mention: Dubai, Istanbul, Beirut, Baghdad, Damascus. What is this?" she whispered to the empty room. She kept searching. Found a business card with Arabic script on it. A USB drive hidden inside a hollowed-out book. A phone, not his regular phone, but a second one, switched off and buried beneath folders. And then the photograph. It was Mark, or Khalid, or whoever he really was, standing in front of what looked like an oil field, massive pumps visible in the background. He stood alongside 3 men in traditional Middle Eastern dress, all of them looking directly at the camera with serious expressions. Patricia turned the photo over. Written on the back in Mark's handwriting: Kirkuk, Iraq, March 2023. March 2023. That was when Mark had told her he was in Houston for a petroleum conference. Patricia felt bile rising in her throat. She ran to the bathroom and vomited, then sat on the cold tile floor, her whole body shaking. Who was Mark Jarrell? Better question, was there even a Mark Jarrell? She stayed up all night going through everything again. Found receipts for plane tickets to cities that didn't match his travel stories. Found bank statements for an account she didn't know existed, showing wire transfers in amounts that made her dizzy: $50,000, $120,000, $200,000. Found a handwritten note in Arabic, which she photographed and ran through a translation app on her phone. Shipment confirmed. Delivery Latakia. Payment on arrival. Patricia felt like she was drowning. Every memory she had with Mark was suddenly suspect. The romantic dinners, had he been surveilling her? The weekend trips, had he been meeting with criminals? The proposal under the stars, had it all been an act? She thought about the life insurance policy Mark had suggested they take out together, just a month ago. He had been insistent about it. Said it was responsible, said it showed they were building a future. The policy was for $500,000. And Mark was the sole beneficiary on hers. Patricia's stomach turned again. Had he been planning to kill her? She didn't sleep that night. Or the next. She just sat surrounded by evidence of a life built on lies, waiting for something, anything, to make sense. The answer came on Thursday morning, in a way she never could have imagined. The doorbell rang at 7:15 a.m. Patricia had been awake all night, sitting at the kitchen table with the passport, the photograph, and the second phone spread out in front of her like pieces of a puzzle she couldn't solve. She was still in her bathrobe, hair unwashed, eyes red and swollen. When the doorbell rang, her first thought was that it was Mark. That he had come back to explain, to apologize, to tell her it was all some terrible misunderstanding. She rushed to the door and yanked it open. 3 people stood in the hallway. None of them were Mark. The man in front was tall, probably in his early 50s, with gray-streaked hair and a weathered face that had seen too many difficult things. He wore a dark suit and had an ID badge clipped to his belt: Interpol. Behind him stood 2 more people, a woman in an FBI windbreaker and a male officer from the Portland Police Department. Patricia J. Stansfield, the man asked, his voice calm but serious. Yes. Patricia's voice came out as barely a whisper. My name is Agent Thomas Brennan, Interpol. May we come in? We need to talk to you about Mark Jarrell. Patricia's legs felt weak, but she stepped aside and let them enter. They sat in her living room, Thomas on the armchair, the FBI agent on the couch, the police officers standing near the door. Patricia sat across from them, pulling her robe tighter around herself, feeling exposed and terrified. Thomas reached into a leather briefcase and pulled out a thick folder. He opened it and placed it on the coffee table between them. Inside were photographs. Surveillance photos of Mark, or the man she knew as Mark, meeting with people in crowded cafes, standing outside warehouses, getting into expensive cars. Documents with official stamps and seals. Reports in multiple languages. Ms. Stansfield, Thomas began, his tone gentle but firm, the man you know as Mark Jarrell is not who he said he was. His real name is Khalid M. Rahman. He is a member of an international criminal organization that operates in Iraq, Syria, and several other countries in the Middle East. Patricia felt like she was going to be sick again. She pressed her hand to her mouth. Thomas continued, watching her carefully. This organization controls illegally seized oil fields in conflict zones. They extract crude oil and traffic it to black market buyers in Europe and Asia, making millions of dollars outside of any government oversight. The money funds further criminal activities, weapons trafficking, bribery, and worse. The FBI agent leaned forward. He's also wanted for his involvement in multiple kidnappings of foreign workers in these regions. Engineers, contractors, journalists. Some of these people were released after ransoms were paid. Others. She didn't finish the sentence. Patricia's whole body was shaking now. I didn't know, she said, her voice breaking. I swear to God, I had no idea. We know, Thomas said quickly, his voice kind. We know you're a victim here, Miss Stansfield. We've been watching Khalid for 14 months, and we've found no evidence that you had any knowledge of his activities. Watching him? Patricia looked up sharply. You knew about him? You knew he was dangerous and you let him. She couldn't finish. The implications were too horrifying. The police officer spoke up. We didn't have enough evidence to arrest him until recently. He was extremely careful. He used multiple identities, moved frequently, kept his criminal life completely separate from his civilian cover. Civilian cover, Patricia repeated numbly. That's what I was. A cover? Thomas nodded slowly. We believe he was establishing a legitimate identity here in the United States. An American fiancé, a respectable job, a clean background check. It would have given him a safe base of operations and made it much harder for law enforcement to track his movements. But why leave? Patricia asked. Why leave on our wedding day? If he wanted this cover so badly. Because we were closing in, the FBI agent said. 2 weeks ago, one of his associates was arrested in Turkey. We think that spooked Khalid. He knew it was only a matter of time before we traced the network back to him. Thomas pulled out another photograph and placed it in front of Patricia. It showed Mark, Khalid, at an airport, going through security with a different passport. This was taken at Vancouver International Airport, 6 hours after your wedding ceremony was supposed to start, Thomas said. He crossed into Canada using a fake Canadian passport, then flew to Dubai. From there, we lost him. Patricia stared at the photo. Mark looked calm. Relaxed. Like a man on a business trip, not a man fleeing international law enforcement. We need your help, Thomas said quietly. Anything you can tell us about him, places he mentioned, people he talked about, phone numbers, email addresses, could help us find him. Patricia's mind was racing. She thought about the passport she'd found, the photograph from Iraq, the phone. Wait here, she said suddenly, standing up. She went to the kitchen table and gathered everything she had found. Brought it back to the living room and laid it out in front of the agents. Thomas's eyes widened. You found all of this? In his desk. In his closet. And hidden in books. Patricia's voice was hollow. I didn't know what I was looking for. I just wanted to understand why he left. The FBI agent carefully photographed each item with her phone. The police officer put on gloves and began placing things into evidence bags. Thomas picked up the photograph from Iraq and studied it carefully. Do you recognize any of these other men? No, Patricia said. I've never seen them before. He turned the photo over and read the note on the back. Kirkuk. That's an oil field city. This is valuable, Ms. Stansfield. Very valuable. They spent the next 2 hours going through everything. Patricia told them about the life insurance policy. About the wire transfers she'd found. About the business card in Arabic in the second phone. When they tried to turn on the phone, it was password protected. The FBI agent said they'd send it to their tech team. Finally, As they were packing up the evidence, Thomas looked at Patricia with something like sympathy in his eyes. "I know this is overwhelming," he said. "I know you're hurting, and I know this isn't fair. But I want you to know, you were in real danger. The fact that Khalid fled when he did may have saved your life." Patricia felt tears streaming down her face again. "Why?" she whispered. "Why me? What did I do to deserve this?" "You didn't do anything," Thomas said firmly. "You were targeted because you were kind, trusting, and stable. That's not your fault. That's his crime." Before they left, Thomas gave Patricia his card. "If you remember anything else, anything at all, call me directly. And Ms. Stansfield. I promise you, we're going to find him. Men like Khalid always make a mistake eventually." After they left, Patricia sat alone in her apartment, surrounded by the wreckage of a life that had never been real. She had waited 35 years to find love. And she had fallen in love with a ghost. 3 weeks passed. Patricia tried to return to normal life. She went back to work at the accounting firm, though she could barely focus on the numbers in front of her. Her colleagues were kind but awkward, not knowing what to say to the woman who had been abandoned at the altar. She moved out of the apartment, couldn't stand being there anymore, and rented a small studio across town. Claire helped her pack, carefully boxing up everything that wasn't evidence. Patricia had given her engagement ring back to the jeweler, but they wouldn't refund it because it had been a custom order. She donated it to a charity auction instead. She saw a therapist twice a week. Dr. Morrison was a patient woman in her 60s who specialized in trauma. She helped Patricia understand that she had been the victim of a sophisticated con artist, that there was no way she could have known. But Patricia still blamed herself. Still went over every conversation, every moment, looking for the signs she had missed. And then, on a Tuesday afternoon, her phone rang. "Ms. Stansfield, it's Agent Brennan." Patricia's heart jumped. "Did you find him?" "We have a lead. A strong one. I wanted to let you know that we're moving on it tonight." "Where?" There was a pause. "I can't give you details yet. But Patricia, would you be willing to come to Seattle? To the FBI field office there? There's something I'd like you to see." 6 hours later, Patricia was on a plane. Claire insisted on coming with her, and Patricia was grateful for the company. They landed at Seattle-Tacoma Airport just after 10 p.m. A federal agent met them at baggage claim and drove them to a nondescript office building in downtown Seattle. Thomas Brennan was waiting in a conference room on the 3rd floor. He looked tired but energized, the way people do when they're close to catching something they've been chasing for a long time. "Thank you for coming," he said, shaking Patricia's hand. "I know this is difficult, but I thought you deserved to be here for this." "For what?" Thomas gestured to a screen on the wall. "We tracked Khalid to Dubai 3 weeks ago, like I told you. But he didn't stay there. He moved to a hotel in Istanbul. We've had him under surveillance for the past 5 days." He pressed a button on a remote, and the screen lit up with a live video feed. It showed the lobby of a luxury hotel, all marble floors and crystal chandeliers. "Turkish authorities are coordinating with us on this," Thomas explained. "In about..." He checked his watch. 15 minutes, they're going to move in." Patricia felt her pulse racing. "He's there? Right now?" "He's in a suite on the 12th floor, meeting with 2 buyers from a Russian oil company. We believe he's negotiating the sale of a shipment of stolen crude that his organization extracted from a field near Mosul." Patricia stared at the screen, feeling surreal. This man, the man she had almost married, was a criminal. An actual, real-life criminal. "Why am I here?" she asked quietly. "What do you want from me?" Thomas looked at her seriously. "I want you to see the truth with your own eyes. I want you to know that the man who hurt you is being held accountable. You deserve that closure, Patricia." They waited. Claire held Patricia's hand. Thomas spoke quietly into a phone, coordinating with the team in Istanbul. And then it happened. On the screen, a dozen Turkish police officers in tactical gear enter the hotel lobby. Hotel guests scattered. The officers moved quickly to the elevators. Another camera angle appeared on the screen, a hallway. The officers moved down it, stopping at a door marked 1247. A battering ram. The door crashed open. Shouts in Turkish. Movement, chaos. And then another camera angle, from inside the room. Patricia saw Khalid clearly for the first time since the wedding day. He was wearing an expensive suit, standing near a window with two other men in business attire. A briefcase lay open on the table, filled with documents. When the police burst in, Khalid's face went from shock to calculation to rage in seconds. He tried to run for a side door, but officers grabbed him. He fought back, shouting in Arabic, struggling against their grip. The camera was close enough that Patricia could see his face clearly. That face she had kissed, had trusted, had loved. Now it was twisted with fury and fear. The officers forced him to the ground, handcuffed him, pulled him to his feet. And then, as they led him toward the door, Khalid looked directly at one of the cameras. His eyes were cold, calculating. The eyes of a stranger. Patricia felt a shiver run through her entire body. Thomas muted the feed and turned to her. "It's over, Patricia. He's in custody. He'll be extradited to the United States to face federal charges, and then he'll likely be transferred to Iraq to face charges there as well. Either way, he's going to prison for a very long time." Patricia couldn't speak. She just nodded, tears streaming down her face. Not tears of sadness. Tears of release. Life after the storm. 2 years later. Patricia sat in the small garden behind her house in Eugene, Oregon. It was a modest house, 2 bedrooms, white siding, a front porch with a swing, but it was hers. Completely, fully hers. She held a cup of hot tea in her hands, watching the late afternoon sun filter through the trees. Birds sang somewhere nearby. A neighbor's wind chimes tinkled softly in the breeze. It was peaceful. She had read in the newspaper a few weeks ago, Khalid M. Rahman sentenced to 18 years in federal prison. The article had been half a page long, with a photo of him being escorted into the courthouse in shackles. Patricia had looked at it for maybe 10 seconds, then folded the paper and thrown it in the recycling bin. It didn't affect her anymore. The first year after the arrest had been hard. Very hard. She had spent months in therapy, processing the betrayal, the fear, the profound sense of violation that came from realizing she had shared her life with someone who had been using her. Dr. Morrison had helped her understand that she wasn't stupid for trusting Khalid. She was human. And humans are wired to trust, to hope, to believe and love. That's not a weakness. That's what makes us capable of real connection. Slowly, Patricia had rebuilt her life. She left the accounting firm, too many memories, too much pity from coworkers who had witnessed her humiliation. She moved to Eugene for a fresh start and found work at the public library. It was a simple job, quiet and calm. She helped people find books, organize community reading programs, and spent her days surrounded by stories instead of spreadsheets. It suited her. Claire still called her every week, even though they now lived 2 hours apart. They had remained best friends through everything, and Patricia was grateful beyond words. Her mother visited once a month, staying for long weekends. They cooked together, watched old movies, talked about everything and nothing. Margaret had her daughter back, and that was all that mattered. Patricia had planted roses in the garden last spring. Red ones, pink ones, yellow ones. They bloomed beautifully, and she spent weekend mornings tending to them, feeling the soil between her fingers, watching new life grow from the earth. She had adopted a cat, a gray tabby named Oliver who slept on her bed and purred when she read in the evenings. She had learned to bake bread from scratch, filling her house with the smell of yeast and warmth. Small things. Real things. She hadn't dated anyone since Khalid. Wasn't sure if she ever would again. But that was okay. She had learned that she didn't need a man to feel complete. Didn't need a wedding to prove her worth. didn't need someone else's validation to know she was valuable. She had her peace, her dignity, her truth. And as she sat in her garden on that warm afternoon, watching the sunlight dance through the leaves, Patricia realized something profound. She had survived. Not just survived, she had rebuilt. She had taken the shattered pieces of her life and created something new. Something honest. Something hers. The man she had loved hadn't been real. But she was. And that was enough. Patricia finished her tea, set the cup down on the small garden table, and closed her eyes, feeling the sun warm on her face. For the first time in 2 years, she felt genuinely happy. And that, she thought, was worth more than any golden lie could ever be. If you were in Patricia's shoes, if you discovered that the person you loved and trusted was living a complete lie, what would you have done differently? Would you have seen the signs earlier? Would you have handled the aftermath the same way? Share your thoughts in the comments below. And if this story touched you, don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more powerful true stories about courage, survival, and second chances. Hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss a story.